Every time prices rise, a piece of your freedom is stripped away. The grocery cart, the rent, the gas, they all pile up on you bit by bit, month after month. If you feel like your salary is no longer enough and your money is melting in your hands, rest assured you aren't imagining things. You are watching the silentest wealth transfer in human history live, that great game repeated in every generation. Because inflation is not just about changing price tags, it is the art of redistributing who will own the future. For most people, inflation is total chaos, out of control prices, eroding savings, a system slipping through their fingers. But for those at the top, inflation is actually a perfectly functioning order. It is the survival formula of modern economics. It is the way governments finance wars by raising taxes without drawing public backlash. It is the method corporations use to wipe out their debts in one stroke. And it is the way the wealthy watch their assets multiply while everyone else struggles to make ends meet. The real question is not what causes inflation, but why it is allowed to happen over and over again. To understand this, we must go back to the days when inflation was considered a national disaster rather than a target. In the early 20th century, economies were backed by gold. Every piece of paper money in your pocket had a corresponding amount of gold in a vault. This made money scarce and hard to find, but solid. In other words, governments couldn't just print money whenever they made a mistake to get out of trouble. Do you have a budget deficit? You either raise taxes and face the public, or you accept defeat. Back then, inflation only occurred during great wars or when the system collapsed. It was a sign of indiscipline. The idea of a government deliberately creating inflation was unthinkable. But then everything was turned upside down. The Great Depression of the 1930s shattered that discipline myth. Prices crashed, salaries vanished, banks blew up. The economy froze, not because of inflation, but because of deflation, falling prices. When money gained value just by sitting there, no one spent it, and debts grew heavier every day. It was an economic death spiral. This event fundamentally changed how states viewed money. By the end of World War II, inflation had transformed from a fear into a tool in the toolbox. Governments emerged from the war with massive debts. Some owed twice their country's total income. There was no way to pay this debt honestly, so they didn't. They outsourced the rest of the job to inflation. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, world debts silently eroded, not because countries got richer, but because the value of money evaporated. $1 billion war debt became pocket change a decade later. The system had learned its lesson. If you create a little inflation under the radar, you can resolve impossible debts without anyone noticing. The final blow came in 1971. Nixon ended the dollar's link to gold. They called it temporary, but it became permanent. At that moment, money stopped being a measure of value and turned into a policy toy. Now there was no gold behind the money, only trust. A piece of paper you couldn't exchange for gold, only for more paper. Inflation was no longer a disease. It was the core component of the system. After that day, the rules changed. Money could be printed limitlessly as long as people believed in it. Governments could borrow infinitely, and banks could distribute endless credit. Investors grasped the reality. In this game, the winners were not the savers, but the debtors, because inflation reverses the logic of money. If you hold cash, you are being robbed. If you are in debt, you are being rewarded. As prices increase every year, the real value of debt decreases. $1 million home loan might look intimidating today, but 20 years later, thanks to steady inflation, Those installments turn into peanuts. Meanwhile, your house, your stocks, and your land gain value upon value. Herein lies the paradox. The very power that ruins the poor is the fuel that keeps the rich wealthy. This isn't a conspiracy, it's simple arithmetic. So, what happens to the ordinary citizen in this order? The answer is both simple and painful. Salaries can never catch up with inflation. Saving is no longer the fortress of the middle class. It is the slow-motion melting of money. Those without property, who live only on their wages, find themselves gasping for breath on an invisible treadmill that never stops. Inflation rewards property ownership, not hard work. It penalizes thriftiness. If the bank gives you 20% interest while inflation is 40%, you aren't making money. You are paying a tax for keeping your money there. Meanwhile, those who borrow at low rates to buy assets multiply their wealth. This isn't luck. It is the design of the system. Money flows upward from where it is printed. Banks, governments, and giant corporations reach that money before its value drops. By the time it reaches you, the money has already been watered down. This is called the Cantillon effect. In the 1980s, the system put everything on autopilot. They set a 2% inflation target under the guise of price stability. 2% sounds very low, even scientific, doesn't it? But over a generation, this rate cuts the value of your money in half. While the average person watches their grocery bill double, the wealthy enjoy watching their assets double. The rich do not fear inflation. They are the owners of it. And what about 2008? That crisis was a great opportunity to clean up the system. But what did they do? They gave a lesson in controlled inflation. They printed trillions of dollars and pumped it into banks. Asset prices soared overnight. The stock market hit records, but salaries stayed flat. The same happened during the 2020 pandemic. Money was distributed, demand exploded, and inflation hit a 40-year high. The result? The wealthy added fortune to fortune, while house prices became unreachable. The public sometimes blames greedy corporations. But this isn't a new greed. It's the same monster the system has been feeding for decades. Inflation doesn't choose who wins, it simply multiplies the power of those who already have it. In reality, we are all captives of a credit-driven economy, and inflation is necessary for this system to survive. The alternative would not be stability, but a total collapse. This is why when central banks say, "We are fighting inflation," they are mostly performing theater. Their goal is not to destroy inflation, but to keep it at a level that won't make you revolt. Because if inflation drops to zero, the machine rusts and stops. Inflation changes not only your wallet, but also your psychology. Instead of "I'll buy it later," it makes you say, "I must consume now." It punishes patience and rewards risk. It turns you into the system's favorite type of citizen, someone who constantly spends, is never satisfied, and chases a security they can never catch. At the end of the day, inflation is not a random event. It is the way power utilizes time. It rewards those who plan for the future and take on debt. It penalizes those who live for today and save through labor. It leaves behind those who still believe money is a store of value. For the rich, inflation is not theft. It is a strategy. Every generation learns this bitter lesson. The value of money is never fixed. The real question is, are you on the side losing money, or the side deciding how much it's worth? Inflation is not a bug in the system. It is the system itself. It is not a fire, but the oxygen that allows the system to breathe. And unfortunately, the world we have built cannot breathe without that oxygen. If what I've told you has given you a new perspective, follow along. History holds all the answers. I'm just showing you where to look.